Thanks for joining us for Faith Meets Mental Health with our host, Kim Boswell, the Alabama Commissioner of Mental Health. If you have any questions for our host, you can always email mentalhealth@fraser.church. We hope you enjoy this week's episode.
Hello and welcome to Faith Meets Mental Health, a ministry of Fraser Church. I'm Kim Boswell, Commissioner of the Alabama Department of Mental Health, and I'm here today with Tyler Grant, our student minister, and we want to spend a little more time today talking about youth and social media.
Yes.
It's such a big thing for our young folks, and I know it's been a hot topic in the mental health field as well, and how the impact of social media, how that plays into someone's either good mental health or not so good mental health.
Yeah.
So Tyler, will you share just a little bit of what you're seeing with our kids here at Fraser?
For sure. So I want to talk a little bit about like the good of social media and the bad, because I think there is some intrinsic good in social media itself. I think back to I have a group of 7 of us who are best friends from high school, and we keep up, and it's strictly through social media. We live all throughout the country, so we're able to continually know what's going on in each other's lives, even though we live hours and hours apart. That's some of the good of social media. Some of the bad is almost self-explanatory. If when people think of social media, they think of the negatives that are associated with it. And one of the most prominently used apps for teenagers right now, I would say, is Snapchat. Instagram is still pretty popular, but Snapchat and TikTok are both very widely used apps. One of the problems with TikTok itself is just the addictive qualities it has. It's a short form content. I was talking with one of our students probably about 5 months ago or something, and we were talking about how he can't watch movies anymore because his brain is wired to watch 10-second short form content on TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts. So in some ways, social media is changing the brain. It's literally changing how they're able to focus on long form content. They can't even watch an hour and a half movie anymore because they want to just scroll through it.
Right.
During COVID, I was talking with one of our girls. We were having a little picnic outside, and I said, "What did y'all do yesterday?" She said, "I scrolled through TikTok for 10 hours. That's all she did for 10 straight hours when they were at home in this pandemic. So of course, brain chemistry has been altered from that moment, and it's continually, shifting. And I'm thankful for the students who see that problem, they delete it and stuff. But then there's Snapchat on the other realm of things, and there's just all kinds of, I would almost say, intrinsic problems with Snapchat, because you send a message and it's deleted as soon as it's sent, and there's just no accountability to what's sent. You can, all kinds of threats can be sent, all kinds of inappropriate pictures and messages that parents will never see because they hide. So there's just a lot of worry in some of these apps that some of our teenagers have access to, and some of them are getting phones as early as 9, 10, 11 years old. And I understand the connectedness and being able to communicate with your student, and you want to make sure they're okay. So, but also we've seen some of our parents do really good jobs of they monitor phones. Because the problem that scares me is the unlimited access to the internet at your fingers with a 12-year-old brain. There's a lot of harm that can be done with that. So those are just, I'm seeing a lot of TikTok, a lot of Snapchat, and those, the addictive qualities of those, but also just like what's being sent, and then the comparison that they see on Instagram. Instagram is where you kind of post in your best. Like I went on to the beach with my friends. I went up on a mountain. Look at me up here. And there's a lot of, I would say, struggles associated with all of those apps in all kinds of different ways.
It's such a hard decision for parents, for grandparents.
Yeah.
I know our 2 granddaughters in Denver, their parents were very, very resistant to getting them phones. And really, it was a big decision because they're both really involved in sports. And their teams all had like these group text messaging systems, where it's like it got to the point to where my oldest granddaughter would be left out because she didn't have a phone and didn't know that after the game, everybody's going, to this place to eat.
Yeah.
And she's our social butterfly. She's our granddaughter that really, pays attention to her social environment for sure. And it was just a really struggle for her. And it was a struggle for, my kids to decide, is this a good time? How do we manage this? How do we monitor it? Because they really honestly did not want to give her a phone.
Yeah, I don't blame them.
Yeah, it's like, we really don't want to do that because they understand, the risk that are involved. And, it's not really about not trusting her as much as just things that she could potentially be exposed to in social media. And so it's really a challenge for parents to make that decision. And, how do you not prevent your child from being engaged in social activities and the things that are really pretty healthy versus protecting them from, social media posts. And I know we've been engaged with a research project where it really looks at sort of, what pops up in your feed.
Yeah.
And there's some science behind that now and looking at it and just how easy it is for kids to type in one word. And then all of a sudden, all sorts of things that they never anticipated are popping up in their feed.
Yeah.
And I was just completely blown away.
Yeah.
Because I don't do social media at all, really, which is, funny.
Yeah. You're probably better off for it.
Yeah.
Though, let's be real.
I think it's good for my mental health.
Yes.
I'm just saying. I don't do it. And so I was really shocked by, the research that shows sometimes just the simplest thing, for that kid who is spending 10 hours a day, if they're just following what pops up in their feed, that can be so absolutely dangerous because one strange word can lead them down a path
for sure
that they never, intended to go down, but because of that kind of addictive quality of it. And I find myself doing that even when I'm looking at the news sometimes. Something will pop up and I'll like, oh, I want to know that. And then I realize it's one of those deals where you just have to keep clicking. And I'm like, why did I just waste 10 minutes of my life doing that?
I'm like, now why am I watching puppies in a pool with ducks? Like, I don't know. You get the most random stuff that comes up. But I was watching a documentary a few years ago on Netflix, and it's just talking about the algorithms that Facebook puts into place. And they're made to be addictive. They're made to want... your phone misses you. Like it actually misses you, and it's trying to get you back to it. You send you notifications, get you back into the phone where you can. And our brains are being reshaped. I mean, all of us, we're on our phones a lot, and you go down these rabbit holes. And one example of that addictiveness is back in August, I just began my my schooling. My whole family had COVID, so we were at home. I'm trying to do school, trying to balance a job, and I have a Nintendo Switch. I love gaming, but we have a 4-year-old, and we haven't let him play it yet, just because it's going to be hard for him. There was no rules that week with COVID. I let him play Mario some, and we monitored it no more than like 30 minutes. But I saw him become so addicted to that screen. Like, he would wake up and say, I want to play the Switch. I want to play Mario. And that's all he could think about, only after playing for a few minutes. So we had to take it and put it away. It's been up on a shelf for about 7-8 months. And we said, when you turn 5, maybe we'll have another conversation. But I saw firsthand how addictive those screens can be, especially we're talking about trauma, and this is still, it's not necessarily trauma, but it's still that growing brain creating all kinds of different synapses. And in that moment, like, he was getting an addictive personality to a screen. And that's one of the other big problems is whenever you're addicted to a screen, and the whole time you're comparing yourself while you're addicted to the scrolling, like, of course we're in a mental health crisis with our teenagers, because all they see is girls who are prettier than them or skinnier than them. We see athletes who are better than me or who are going out and spending thousands of dollars on vacations. And of course we're living in this inferiority complex because we're not doing that.
Right. So
I feel for teenagers. Sometimes I struggle with that as a 30-year-old man. Like, I see youth groups that are bigger than ours, and I see people who have better degrees than me. And I'm like, I'm struggling just like our teenagers do on social media. So it's there to mess with us and get us back there as fast as possible.
Yeah, I get a lot of flack as commissioner because I don't do social media very much, because there are some of my peers that do it a lot.
Yeah.
And, it's like one particular organization, I said, I don't do social media. And he's like, what? You don't? I mean, how do you communicate? And I'm like, well, the department has a social media site, but like my face is not out there. And then, on the other end of the spectrum is my good friend at the Department of Corrections who's having, there's a lot going on there. And so his position is now I don't read the newspaper and I don't look at social media. And I think probably that's a good thing for his mental health.
Yeah.
So it's, as adults, I feel very fortunate, even though, I kind of had some interesting childhood experiences. I really feel like we were raised to like not be, we never were encouraged to do something because somebody else was doing it.
Yeah.
In fact, it was absolutely the opposite. It's the old, well, if Johnny jumps off the cliff, are you going to, it was so much like that's not ever going to be a good reason for me to let you do something. So that argument never worked. And I feel like it was easier because, when I was growing up, you went to school and then in the summertime, you went home and you didn't necessarily see all the other kids. You saw your cousins or family or whatever. And now, that can sometimes be the downside is kids, even if they're being bullied, they can continue to be bullied over the summertime if they're looking at social media.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, how do you help them get away from that, and have some downtime and be present in the moment? And I feel like that's our struggle as a society, not just for our kids. Sometimes I feel like as adults, we don't do a very good job of role modeling.
Absolutely.
Being like present in the moment, like be where your feet are, as some folks say. Because as adults, we kind of model that, busyness. We got to go, we got to go, we got to go. And I think we could all benefit from just kind of slowing down a little bit, taking a deep breath, and really just being where we are and being present in the moment. And that was the other thing I loved about the Shockoe experience, because you could tell those kids were present in the moment, right where their feet were planted, and loving life, really.
Did you read my brain? Because I was going to literally talk about this exact Sabbath kind of thing. Like,
did
wow,
you not
Kim,
know I had that skill?
Is that part of it? Like being the commissioner? It's just part of the position, as you were able to telekinesis as well.
my staff worries sometimes, because I tell them, I'm like, it'd be really helpful if you could have the mind reading skill, because then I wouldn't have to say all this stuff.
Yeah, actually the class I'm taking right now, my counseling class, is the telekinesis. I was going to speak exactly to that issue of one thing that I've been doing a lot of reading on and studying on is Sabbath in and of itself. And part of the mental health summit we're going to have is Dr. Matthew Sleeth, I think that's his name, and he speaks a lot on Sabbath and the importance of that. And I'm excited for him to share what we've heard from the different talks. But I also read a book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I read that about 2 years ago after I went through a season of almost burnout, through a really hard summer of ministry. Me and my wife went away to North Carolina for a weekend just to get away from the busyness of life. And I read this book and I was so convicted after reading it. And, all kinds of different practices of Sabbath. But one of the things that John Mark talks about is that if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy, because sin and busyness both cut off our connection to the Lord. And I think with our phones, we've become so connected. We've become so busy. And even just scrolling, we're just busy scrolling and not being present in the moment. So one of the things I've started to do on occasions on weekends is we do a 24-hour Sabbath, and we call them our together days with me and my family. I have 2 kids, a 4-year-old Judah and a 1-year-old Elsie. And Friday night, will text my parents, text the people that need to know, like, hey, I'm putting my phone away for the next 24 hours. I'm turning it off. I'm staying as far away as I possibly can from my phone, just so I can be connected with my kids and my family, because it's so easy for me to be doing bath time with my daughter and be playing a game on my phone. It's just part of my brain chemistry has changed and being addicted to my phone. So it helps me. And another thing we did, you were talking about Shockoe, you could tell they were present. we did a middle school and a high school retreat back in October, November, and one of the stipulations was they had to turn in their phone for the whole weekend.
Oh, wow.
So Friday night we got there, we took their phones up and we kind of put them on stage, so it kind of like, there's your phone in front of you. But they were able to be so much more present. And we had some girls bring some old school digital cameras, and just like, it felt like when I was back in youth group and having those experiences, but they were able to be present and not have to worry about just being on their phone. And, so I think there's so much good in taking a Sabbath, and even if that Sabbath is from our phones, just so that we can be present with the people around us, and sometimes just be present with ourselves,
right?
And be okay with just thinking and being okay with the quiet.
And I think sometimes, I know for me, the challenge is I'm not very good at dealing with my feelings as they come up, and so sometimes what happens is I sort of shuffle that to the back, and then when I'm still and I'm quiet, then of course all of that stuff sort of comes back to my mind. And the easy thing to do is just go make myself busy.
Yeah.
And it's so much harder to just go, okay, I need to sit in the moment, deal with those emotions. It's like I've really known for a year I needed to do some grief work.
Yeah.
Like I have some leftover grief stuff for a multitude of reasons. And I realized today, I'm like, I said I was going to do this last year. And here I am a year later, and I've done some journaling. I've done some stuff to try and work through it. But what I know is I need a good 24 to 48 hours of just absolute quiet time to kind of process through all that, because I'm really good at, I can busy up my day.
Yeah.
There are plenty of people blowing up my phone or, problems that present themselves. And it's just a real challenge, I know, as an adult. And I know for our kids, we have to kind of model that for them and say it's okay to have some downtime. It's okay not to be busy. Which is not always the easiest thing to do.
It's so easy to almost be addicted to that busyness of just like, I have to be productive. And I actually saw on Instagram, ironically, last night, of a pastor in Miami, and he was talking, he had a shirt about like productivity is good, busyness isn't. It's like rest can be productive. Busyness isn't productive. Like we like this facade of, I'm busy, I'm being productive. Not necessarily. Like production is different from busyness. And even thinking about it in a different way, like honestly, the last time I remember being completely quiet was back in October, and it's March right now.
Right.
It's been 6 months, and I was driving through the mountains. We were at our cousin's wedding in North Georgia. I had no service. I dropped my wife off or something, and I had 30 minutes by myself. My Spotify wasn't working, nothing. And I got kind of scared. I was like, I have to be completely quiet for 30 minutes. But it was so good just to pray and to think and just like be present right there in the moment and like just let the Lord speak to me in those moments. It was just, it's very different than what I'm used to. I always have a podcast or music or something going on, but just being okay with the quiet. We had one girl, there's a Spotify Wrapped comes out every year, and it tells you all of the music you've listened to for a full year. The amount of music she listened to was like 100,000 plus hours. It equated to like 100 straight days of listening to music.
Wow.
In a year. So it's like, there's no downtime. There's no time for quiet to just be and to rest and recuperate. So a lot of that to just talk about the importance of Sabbath and disconnecting for a little bit for the sake of our mental health.
Well, and being able to hear, the voice of the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely.
I mean, this time of year, I really will say this time of year during Lent and leading up, to Good Friday and Easter, it is a little bit easier for me because I'm so much more aware of the sacrifice that was given. And there's just something about this time frame in the life of the church that really makes it a little bit easier. We're not quite into spring, we're past the holidays, but it's still a challenge, I think, for everybody just to get to that point. But it's really, truly the only way that we can really understand, the will of God for our life is for us to be quiet long enough to hear his voice instead of, hearing our own or all the other, voices out there. So
what's the story in 1st or 2nd Kings, I believe, where Elijah's trying to listen for the voice of the Lord, and it's not through the thunder or through the earthquake, it's through the still small whisper. And we were on a retreat with our staff last week, and we had 2 hours of a prayer retreat. So I guess there was quiet last week. Then before that,
I'm going to need some witnesses that say that you were quiet.
We can ask some of our staff, maybe an hour and a half, if that. But I walked around for a little bit of it because I just couldn't sit still. It was so hard for me. And it was during a time of a prayer retreat where it was just about listening. And I said, Lord, speak to me for 20 minutes, which for me sounds like an eternity. And I was like, Lord, just speak to me, speak to me, speak to me. And I didn't hear anything in that moment. I got frustrated. And one, it was because I did not allow enough time. It was just like 20 minutes. I'm expecting the Lord to give me this big divine will and inspiration, but he didn't. My brain's always going. But then I get back, and I'm reading some verses a little bit further on, and I journaled from John 10:10, and my life verse is John 10:10, where the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Jesus comes to give life to the full. But later on in those verses, it's talking about listening. And then there's a story and talking about Samuel and him going before God, and just the Lord's coming near Samuel and saying, I'm here. I came, and Samuel, listen to me. And Samuel says, I'm here. I'm ready to listen. And I think it's just so important for us to just get away and be quiet long enough to hear the voice of the Lord. It's not necessarily going to happen in 20 minutes on a walk through the woods, but allowing margin so the Lord can speak to us in the middle of our rest.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. I think this time of year is a perfect time to do that.
Absolutely.
And thank you, Tyler. I appreciate you really working with our kids and knowing your heart and how much you love them and care for them. I just really appreciate all you do.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you so much, Kim.
Sure.
Thanks again for listening, and don't forget, if you have any questions that you would like to be discussed on an upcoming episode, you can always email mentalhealth@fraser.church. Also, you can view video of our episodes on fraser.church/videos or on youtube.com/fraserchurch. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.